It flies, man.
Especially when you're having fun. Guys, welcome to Church Stories Podcast. I'm Shama.
What's up?
And 2 years, and I haven't updated my phone. I use the same phone, and I've got a screen protector on it, and it's cracked. So that's me. That's me. If you just wanted to know who I am, I'm a techie who does have old. I got old tech. PD.
My name is PD, and I actually got my phone fixed. I got the screen fixed. There are no more cracks anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
They're just the complete opposite of each other, you and I.
Yeah, but it took me like a solid year.
Yeah.
It had cracks in it for a while.
And guys, listen. We're not gonna waste any more time. Y'all are here.
NBA playoffs.
Y'all are here for us, but y'all ain't. Guys, back on the show today.
He was the drummer in the Bachman Brothers Band.
And you know the Bachman Brothers Band because they've been on the show. 2 of the 3 have been on the show before, back from season 1 and season 2.
Yeah.
It's everyone's favorite uncle.
Started in the basement, now we here.
He's the creator of the powerhouse. He just put on his shades. What are you doing still listening to this podcast? Don't listen to this podcast. You got to watch it right now. It's 2 cams. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Tim Bachman.
Woo. With an intro like that, I had to put these on.
Yeah, but you had to put the glasses on.
I feel like...
I'm surprised you didn't have like a leather jacket just didn't appear on top of your shirt.
Well, I would say I had to kind of come strong like Joel Embiid or Ben Harris because I'm a Philly guy. I like the NBA. But Joel Embiid's representing walking up into Disney in a hazmat suit. So I'm not doing that. So I'm also just going to... I'm just going to take these off.
Hey, yeah. Put on those real glasses, Uncle Tim.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, for this episode...
Extremely fragile.
Yeah.
With those very super thin lenses.
Ooh.
Polycarbonate see-through.
They're always stylish, Tim Bachman.
Yeah, I wish I could be more like y'all. Seriously, I was going to do the T-shirt and like cargo shorts in spite of how hideous my legs look with no sun for like 5 years. But
I thought you were going to say the past couple of months. You're like, no, 5 years. It was a half a decade running.
It's been a while now. And here's the thing. I'm just going to jump right into this. Here's the thing.
We didn't.
My two youngest daughters come up to me the other day, and I'm trying to be like it's a big deal for me. Is people think I'm confident outside in a crowd or whatever, and that's fine, I guess. But I'm very introverted about a couple of things. My legs, my feet and my legs, they're not good. They're not. And then you have 2 younger children, and you're gonna get this. It's coming your way, Sham. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
They will be so. Your children will be so candid with you, and they love you, and they really feel like they're helping you.
Yeah.
And in some ways they might be, but it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
Okay. So they walk at me, and the youngest one, her name is Destiny. I'm blessed to have 4 amazing daughters, and it's just a gift from God. I love being a dad to my babies, and the youngest, Destiny, is very transparent. Just says what she thinks, and which means don't ever put her out in a public setting and ask her to give you her opinion about yourself or you. You know, like
watch out.
Oh,
it's like cutting bomb wires. You're like, which one?
Tony. It's like how he was when he was
Says
a kid.
what he thinks. Says what he thinks.
She looks at me and says, "Dad, you need to shave your legs." This is what just out of nowhere,
unprovoked.
Yeah, I said, "Why?" She said, "Because they're too hairy." And I'm like, well, "And what do you have as like what do you just weigh that up against? What is it that you compare my legs to?" "Oh, I've seen some men's legs." And I'm thinking like, what the heck? It was very troubling, Paul David. That's your cousin.
Yeah.
You are my nephew. I am literally Uncle Tim because I am.
Yeah.
And I mean,
we'll get her some help.
Yeah, I started to say, I immediately picked up the 1-800 I Got Crazy Kids hotline, and they came on over and began to counsel with her at that point.
Yeah.
But for some reason later that night, I found myself shaving my legs. I don't know.
You gave in.
It was very embarrassing.
You're like, I've been insulted. Insult me once, shame on me.
Yeah. But then they felt like that was nice and smooth. This is getting really weird now. Okay, so I'm just gonna say,
no. Hey,
they call any hair on my face. They call it scruffles.
Scruffles.
Yeah, my 2 youngest daughters and my older daughters did that too, which maybe because I said that to all of them.
Yeah. So like, we're just saying what you said.
Yeah, and so they don't like scruffles, and instead of like whipping my children or time out, I hold them down. Just take about 3 days beard growth and just rub it on their face.
Yeah.
It works. It really
That's
works. So
welcome back, Uncle Tim.
hey, man, I'm glad to be back. And I just went on a tangent just then.
Hey.
I'm loving the digs.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I really am loving the digs. Okay.
You were loving the digs until then?
Yeah, I walked
Thought
in.
we had you.
I walked in on the back end, the very closing segment or two of a previous guest,
Yeah.
who is like one of my faves of all time. In fact, that would be my favorite guest ever on your podcast.
Ari's so funny.
And so I just, out of respect, just did the greeting thing, and then I just wanted to listen to her because there's something about her that's not normal, and I mean that. And I don't want to go straight serious from the get-go like I can do sometimes before it's over, without any intention. But that woman is gifted, talented, anointed of God. If there's ever been a person that I think fits the description of, she can give or share or has inside of her the gift of laughter, as much as anybody. And I've been to some of your shows. You guys do a great job with these comedy nights that you've done. In fact, I'm upset that they're not happening more often.
I know.
This whole COVID-15 thing is really, I mean, no, this whole whatever it is, it's really hurt the old comedy action probably in here and neighboring communities and other states even. You guys, you brought a lot of talent to our market of Greenville, South Carolina. Can I say Greenville? Can I just stamp that?
Yeah.
But she, to me, there's a couple, 3 others, and of course, you guys are at the top of the list, the two of you. But I'm going to say that she was my favorite, man.
Yeah.
She was my favorite to listen to.
Like Shama asked Brandon Rainwater, right? Do you remember Brandon Rainwater? He headlined a couple of our shows.
I did remember him.
Yeah.
I do remember him.
Yeah, he suggested Ari, and then Shama was like, yeah, I'm thinking about booking this girl. And then I watched a video from where she was like a weekend to stand up, and then I was like, no, not this person. Like, what?
Yeah.
Are you sure about this?
Right.
And then it's because she had been a weekend in that video
she was
that I
super
watched.
new, too.
And then but I mean she. By the time we had her on our show, like she had been doing it for a while, so she was really good, and I was just wrong because I hadn't seen anything else. But it was 5 days into stand up.
Like we had what's his name, Dusty Slay on our one of our shows in downtown.
Yeah,
and
that sounds like a wrestler's name,
Dusty Slay.
Because I think about Dusty Rhodes, I think about the word Slay. Something like Dusty, weighing in, Dusty Slay. Yeah.
He's in the wrong profession. That's what
My
he's
bad.
doing.
Yeah,
but then he went on to PD sent me a text. And he's like, "Hey, Dusty's on the late night show. He's doing
Jimmy
a set."
Kimmel and all kinds.
I'm like,
of
"What the
stuff.
heck?
And
You gotta be kidding
Ari
me!
did Food Network. She's on Worst Cooks in America. Yeah.
Isn't that
Crazy.
great, man?
Yeah.
Well, today I'm just going to tell you. I sat before coming here. I know there's all the thing because I have the background that you guys have in media, and I understand that and embrace it, having been involved in those areas myself off and on in my lifetime in between stints in prison. But no, when I was doing prison ministry is what I mean. What is that?
Okay. I was about to,
What in the world?
I didn't know that about Uncle Tim.
Yeah, my goodness. No. So, but seriously, prison ministry. That's where you go in and don't stay. But
Did you ever call anything the Timistry?
No, I did not. My father probably. I love my dad so much, but if he could have thought of that, he would have used that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my dad has used the word ministry more than any human being alive. And I love my dad, man. He is I honor him and bless him. I'm just telling the straight up truth.
Yeah.
Because I was told that if I didn't tell the truth on this show, that'd be like repercussions. And I just want you guys to know I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
But so back to what I was saying is, I was in a car with somebody who I was at a church. This is we're actually taping, whatever you call it, recording this, or it's airing live right now. I don't know.
Oh, we're taping it.
Yeah. So this is happening on a Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
and I have been to church, and thus the attire.
Yes.
And very jealous of your wardrobe choices right now. And so I was in church, in an amazing church here in Greenville, and the drummer was a guy that is one of the best drummers around, and his name's Aaron Lord, tremendous musician. And he asked me, he said, "So where are you going now? What are you going to do this afternoon?" We'd gone and gotten lunch, he and his family, and me and my daughters, and it's just a blessed time. And he said, "Where are you headed?" And I told him. He said, "Oh, man, and he knows you enough to know you. And said, so say hi to Paul David and that kind of thing. And he said, who else is there? And I explained. And when I said to him that the Chick-fil-A song, he goes, all of a sudden he's like, oh, okay, good. What? Now that, yeah. So that's a slice of fame, my friend.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I just went ahead and told him about the whole VeggieTales thing and all the other things that have been happening about how you're currently writing a musical for the president. And, I don't know what's happening right there. I got off track.
It's called the Oval Office, guys.
Yeah.
And no.
So don't you guys pretend like you don't know what it is to have some acclaim. You guys, this whole thing was like, first time I was even heard of what you were doing, you were like in a dungeon.
That was where I slept, Uncle Tim.
Oh, what I meant was what I meant.
Yeah,
what I meant to say.
I was telling Ari that this is the season 3 is we're trying to bring back a lot of past guests to give them this is the red carpet non-AC treatment. We're like, hey guys, we have microphones and stands now and cameras and lights, and you can look good on our show now as opposed to.
Yeah, this is
spending time in PD's lair.
Yeah, I don't know how many side jobs you guys have worked, or when you hit the mother load with the VeggieTales gig, or what happened. Yeah. I'm just saying that major props to you. This is like wow,
Vegas. This is kind of where it all happened.
I'm feeling it. I feel like it's going to bring out my A game.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Uncle Tim has a story that just the preview of the story had me laughing hysterically on the phone.
This has been pending for a long time. Yeah. PD told me about this story maybe like a year ago. I'm like, dude, we got to have Uncle Tim on. He's got to tell the story. We got to have Uncle Tim on. He's got to tell the story. And here we are, guys. I don't know what the story. Do you want to set it up, PD? I just wanted to.
I think that you should just start.
Well, if you're talking about, and I know at the moment in time in which, and we may mark this kind of time in all of our lives historically, and we joke about a lot of things. There's a lot of things that aren't funny that are happening right now, and I want to say I can tell this story, which is true, 100% true, and I promise you, I've told my share of stories that I've embellished things just for the sake, and haven't we all? Yeah, somewhat, but there's still, just sweeten it a little bit, and my dad, who's a lifetime minister, pastor, used to call it in church terms or minister title terms, speaking evangelistically, not evangelistically. Just kind of stretch it on out there a little bit.
That's funny.
Hey, that's really good.
You have to be careful, son. You don't stretch it too far, and stuff. But
the Bachmans and puns. Let me tell you something. The puns that I've heard out of people with the last name Bachman in the Greenville up in the upstate area has been very impressive. Well, I'm jealous.
I can tell this because of my mother, and I can tell it. And we talk about this serious time we're in, where there's a lot of unrest in the United States of America and around the world. There is something that, whether you believe it's cooked up, whether it was a scheme or a plan or a plot, whether you believe it's completely legitimate in every sense of the word. Yeah. Our nation is in a position that it's never been in my lifetime. When I sat down recently and talked to my 84-year-old father, who I've referred to like 14 times already, and this is really weird. I didn't plan on doing that.
Shouts out to Freddie
but
B.
yes, sir.
Who was a guest on this show.
And who, by the way, I was over by his house last night, and he was in his laundry room because that's where, for whatever reason, he has a flagship phone. He has a good phone. It was a flagship for LG a couple of years ago. But for some reason, his phone picks up the Wi-Fi in the house better in the laundry room.
Wow.
And he was out there doing listening to the podcast from my brother Scott that was on recently.
Awesome.
And I could hear him laughing. That laughed at your grandfather. That would be your grandfather.
Yeah.
We called him Papa. But we were talking. He said, "Son, I've never lived in anything like this. I'm 84." And he said the closest thing was the polio epidemic, which that makes him seem really old that he lived through that. But he said, and that was nothing really truly like this. And then he talked about a couple of other things they call plagues and different things. I said, no, that was in the Bible. But he said that they had some plagues in his lifetime too. But I just said, Dad, we just need to stay alert and pray and use wisdom. And the other part is, the racial unjust in our nation, not unjust, unrest.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of injustice. There's a lot of misunderstanding, I believe, as much as anything.
Right.
But at the same time, I prefer not to speak about things I don't truly understand.
Yeah.
And I can try all day to talk about racial injustice when I don't have any experience with it myself.
Yeah.
I've experienced in my lifetime the closest thing was some socio-economic unfair profiling, if you will, because where we came from as a family when we were very young, my parents never told us, made us feel like we were poor, but we were poor. But with God, you're rich in all things. We were never broke, but we were poor. Like Bishop T.D. Jakes says, I never knew that my spaghetti sauce was ketchup until I went to a restaurant and tasted some bolognese sauce with meatballs.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, "What is this in my spaghetti?" And they said, "That's sauce." He said, "No, it isn't." And, but so I didn't know.
Yeah.
But my mother did the best of anybody in my life at teaching me to love people. So prophetically, to use a controversial phrase, it was spoken over me more than once in my lifetime that I would minister to people of other races, not just the white or Caucasian race, and that I would be comfortable and at home with African Americans specifically. And that's not something that's uncomfortable for me to ever look at, say, or talk about. And it all started with a super short story that sets up the story. And when I was a little kid, all my friends at school in Alabama, I'd say as many were black as they were white. And our schools were probably 60%, 50-50 at best, maybe 60% black, 40% white. And I'm trying to get those numbers right because I wasn't very good in math. But I think that comes out to 100%. So, I mean, they literally have, they had announced it underground, if you will, gang, like fights, race fights in the middle of a giant playground field. And they'd find like forks and crazy shanks and different tools. These were like 8th and 9th graders fighting.
What?
And and a lot of kids would stay home from school on those days. And again, that was a long time ago, but it was real. And I don't even begin to pretend I knew what anything was like that my father experienced. And so he would tell me stories of coming down from Detroit, Michigan to marry and meet and marry my mother, and couldn't understand how people treated people of color in the South because he was from Michigan and it wasn't like that. And he thought it was just a story, a fable, but he saw it with his own eyes. So my mother, raised in a very Southern environment, somehow it was because of her heart. And you remember, Nana, she loved everybody. She didn't care whether you were rich or poor, black or white, green or purple, tall or short, overweight, underweight, had a perfect smile, or you looked like you were the poster child for, some dental company trying to fix people. You know what I mean? She didn't give a rip, man. And she really meant that. And I would bring kids home from school because I loved friends and I talked a lot. And I would bring them home because my brother Scott never would. So it was okay. There was no need for no competition there.
And that fits both of your personality types. So.
Scott couldn't wait to get home from school. I didn't want to. I loved school because of the social activity part. And I'd bring kids home, and most of the time they were black. Yeah. In fact, very rarely did I bring any of those uppity white folk home. No, what in the world? But I hardly ever did that. So I brought home a couple of kids, and one day we'd play ball together. We'd play baseball or basketball or throw the football. One day my baseball glove went missing. I left it out in the front yard, and back then you left things unlocked. You didn't care. You didn't freak out over locking everything down. And our neighbor came over to my mom and dad's house, which is right beside the church that they pastored, knocked on the door. Sweet lady. She wasn't a bad human, but she had some things that were put in her from birth. She never saw anything else towards people of color, and she told Mom, she said, I heard that Tim's glove was missing, and then my bike went missing, a bike. And then she heard about that, and she said, I can tell you who it was. Now, what she said was, I bet it was that black boy that he keeps bringing home from school. And my mom looked at her and said, I'm just going to say Jones, because even though nobody would ever figure out who she was, I'm going to say, well, her name wasn't Jones. But she said, Miss Jones, I'm going to be very respectful to you because my mom knew your mom and we knew your family, and I do respect you and honor you. And she said, but don't you ever say something like that, because I was standing beside my mother and she asked me to step back, and she said, don't you ever say something like that in front of my son. And she said, and don't you ever accuse his friends of something based on their color. And she said, because when you cut them and cut me, we bleed the same. And she said, well, I can't believe, Joanne, you did that. And she said, well, you need to get used to it, and I need you to leave, and I need you to leave my house and go home. And then Mom sat me down and had a talk that was pivotal to change my whole life.
Yeah.
And it was legit. I'm not trying to put a disclaimer on what I'm about to tell, because I'm so at home. All through my life, I've always had extremely close friends of color, which means they were black, because I didn't hang with a Latino crowd because I wasn't around that.
Yeah.
It just was exposure. But people that I loved to worship with, most of them were black. And it was just a fit that was just, it felt right for me. And I remember the closest I ever came to getting in a fight at school, it was over in about 2 seconds because I got hit and I was on the ground with a kid named, I will say his name, because his name was Sadell Threet, and he was black. And my best friends in that particular gym class were black. And I loved basketball. I wanted to be good at it.
Yeah.
I wanted to play. And those guys were just, we played ball together.
Yeah.
And Sadell Threet grabbed the ball from me and said, what you going to do about it? And he used basically what would be called a racial slur towards white people. And I said, what? I said, just give it back. And he said something else. Next thing I know was I saw stars and heard my ears ringing, and I was on the ground. And I come to myself. He just punched me right in the face, basically, is what I was told. And I was on the ground, literally. He hit me in the temple and lost my equilibrium, my balance. And I came off the ground being helped up by somebody to see about 3 other of my friends that were all black beating the ever-loving dog out of him in the corner of the gym.
Yeah.
And then, we all got in trouble for fighting. But that kid never, ever even, he would not even walk near me after that. I don't know what they did or said to him. So I'm just saying, the relationship I have with people of color goes back to my childhood because of the impartial, pure heart of my mother. And my dad was the same way, but Dad didn't have to apply that. He grew up thinking, what's wrong with you people?
Yeah.
So my mother grew up seeing it, and she said, I don't want none of it. So she taught us boys not to be that way. So I could go on and tell other stories about other family members of ours that have relationships, black and white people together, and that's not bad or unusual or abnormal. Yeah. It is what it is, and it's a beautiful thing. So the story I'm about to tell, however, is something that is not going to be bad, but I can't make this up. What happened on that Sunday morning?
So I want to let you get to that, but I was going to say that, now there's a big fight for people, trying to be woke and progressive and to speak life and to hear you saying your mom, Miss Joanne, rest in peace, was at the time, I mean, now they would say woke, but at the time, just was doing the right thing.
Right.
And you went, hey, this is not how, you're not going to speak, you're not going to instill, you're not going to plant those seeds in my household. And also just cultivated the understanding of, hey, we're all the same and we're going to treat people the same, and biases, bias doesn't have a place here.
And what was the story
that
she told me?
That's phenomenal.
Of her bringing buses of black kids into the church.
Right. The actual physical location of the first church they pastored, they were the associate pastors, and that pastor resigned or retired. They became the pastors. It was in a very bad part of town, economically speaking, and white and black people lived in that part of a little town called Eufaula, Alabama. And so the Lord spoke to her about starting or helping to progress a bus ministry, which used to happen in churches a lot. They sent out buses to pick up people to come to church. And she felt like, why are we only sending it to the white people? So she started busing in black kids to the church, and a lot of the staunch old liners that were there just did not think it was a good idea. And she basically was like, well, if they can't come, then nobody should be able to come, because Jesus died for them like he died for the others, no matter what the color of their skin. So it went back even before then. That was before I was even born, or when I was just a little bitty baby. And to finish that earlier little snippet, they did find the person that stole my bike and my glove, and it was and I don't judge him because he's white, but it was a troubled white kid that lived about across a creek bed and a ditch way back behind where our church property was. And one day a knock came on the door, and it was a local police officer with that kid asking to speak to my mom and dad, and if they wanted to press charges against him because they had enough with the bike and the glove, which were returned by them.
Yeah.
And we did proof of ID, that kind of thing. Kind of like going to a pawn shop and finding your stuff.
Yeah.
And proof of ID.
Yeah.
What else? Anyway, that's not really fun. But and he said, you want to press charges? And my dad looked at Mom, and she said, honey, don't do it. She said, don't. And Dad said, well, how about this? How about if we just have him come to church for the next three Sundays or something like that. And of course the kid was like, I'll do it, Pastor Bob. I'll do it, preacher. I'll do it.
So you pressed charges, but the charge was go to church for 3 weeks.
That's kind of how it came out, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's mean to say that. This is the worst church in town.
And if you talking back to me now, you're gonna have to be there at Sunday school too.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're gonna call the police back. And we're gonna lengthen this punishment.
I think you touch on a very important subject when people talk about like, well, race. Well, what can we do? Yeah. And there's this big push for, well, what can you do right now, or what are you doing right now?
Yeah.
Where I'm like, it's a marathon.
It is.
It is a marathon of reaching out to people and eating with people that you don't typically know or their culture, whatever. And I don't know, man. It's just forever reaching out, as opposed to now I've equated it to when they're like, oh, white people, you need to do everything you can now. I'm like, well, you don't go to the gym and do everything in one day. And if you do, you hurt. You know what I mean? It is bad for you. It's I think the people who've had the foresight of hey, I think this church, my business, my family, we're not just going to hang out with people who look like us.
Yes.
I think that understanding spans and should last and should have existed a long time ago. And yeah.
I didn't know any of this was going to go this way, but I just thought of this so strongly and feel like I need to say this. My parents, you remember Nana and Papa's place up on Little Texas Road? And you may have even been to that house before.
I think I knew you all after they had moved.
And it was a popular place to bring, for my older daughters, Bethany and Brooke, to bring their friends back when they were in high school and middle school. They'd have sleepovers in this like guest house that the church my dad pastored had helped finish and facilitate and stock for people to come and stay for free when they needed a break, when pastors were just about to lose it. Over the stress of being a pastor, or missionaries would come back to the U.S. had nowhere to stay. They could stay there at no charge. And then when I got into broadcasting and television, sports TV shows, coaches would bring their families, or recruiting people could stay there and for free, and it would be a gift and fly under that NCAA radar and that kind of mess. Seriously, it was a good thing. Wow. And and they always left these huge amounts of cash under the sofa. No, they did not. I just got to be funny for
and
a
you're
minute.
Like, wait a second. So, what happened in the guest house?
So my three daughters, well, I have four, but Bethany and Brooke said, Dad, can we invite some of our guy friends over to Nana and Papa's and have dinner and just hang out? And I said, absolutely, just ask Nana and Papa, and they did. So I was up there with them. They invited 3 guys, and all 3 of them were black. All 3 of them were athletes at their high school that were very well known and very sought after as far as scholarships. They were just, and I got to know them through high school sports TV work, and they were just stand-up kids that came from. One of them saw his mother shot literally in the front yard of his house,
man,
and that kind of a deal, and that didn't mean he had to because he was black. If he was white, he would have never seen that, because we see tragedy in every race, man.
Yeah,
and
no skin color,
and so exactly. All I can tell you is that my dad that night did something that ranked right there with anything my mom ever did to teach me about not looking at race or skin color.
Yeah.
In that when the mistake was made, though, and this is going to sound so wrong, but here we go, is that my dad ordered Chinese for these 3 young African American young men from out in kind of the rural area of South Carolina. I'm not going to say what high school my girls went to. Those who know them know, because I don't want to brand anything.
Yeah.
And they were just picking at their food, and finally I just pulled one of them out, because they always, Mr. Bachman, they were so polite. I said, I was like, hey, I called him by name and I said, is everything all right? He said, yeah, man, we don't eat that much. He said, because I said, why not? He said, because we always heard they cook that stuff for cats and dogs, is what he said. And I said, no. He said, no, man, it's for real. I know it's true. I believe it. And I said, you know what, then don't worry about that. And we got a pizza in there or something like that. And that was just more Chinese food for me, Paul David. So I wasn't complaining.
You're like secretly like, oh, I mean, well, we could get.
But they start to leave, and they're all in one car, and one of the young men backed his car into a little bit of a ditch there at my parents' place, and it got stuck bad enough to where we couldn't get it out.
Oh.
So my father and mother said, two choices. My dad just stepped up and said, two choices, young man. And I thought, I'll be honest with you, I thought, oh, here we go. I didn't know what Papa was going to do, because he could be a little old school that way. He's a progressive man, but he could be, I was like, oh my goodness, what's he going to do? And I was holding my breath, honestly. And my dad said, you can spend the night as our guest at the guest house. We'll get fresh towels up there, make sure the sheets are clean, and you guys can stay. We'll cook you a good breakfast in the morning. Promise you it won't be Chinese. Everybody had a laugh. He said, he pulled out the keys to his Mazda truck that he enjoyed driving a lot, and it was a nice, small Mazda extended cab truck, and he threw them to the guy who had backed the car in and said, or you can take my truck home and you can bring it back tomorrow when you come to get and sort all this out. Don't stress over this. The car's going to be here. We won't let nothing happen to it, and that'll give you time to figure out what's best.
Wow.
And they drove my dad's truck, wrecked it, like almost totaled it about a mile and a half from the house.
No.
In a curve there on Little Texas, right before you get to Row Road, that little cut through, there's always like
very windy.
Yes.
You remember driving me
and
home?
they had just put down some fresh gravel, and they hit that gravel and panicked when they hit the brakes. And Dad had these 8 power brakes, which were hideous in the way, and they just locked it down. And the guys at the body shop who I knew personally said that it was this close to being totaled. They were able to salvage it on a rack or something. Sounded like medieval, but they put it on the rack.
They put it on.
Yeah, and the truck began to scream.
Jethro, put the vehicle on the rack. Lift it.
And the truck just spilled everything within about 5 minutes, and everything got fixed. But my dad just laughed at that. And
really?
I'll be honest, yeah. And he said, you know what do you do? And the folks came and helped the next day that the young man had been adopted by when his mother was killed. And they got the car. They started giving him a hard time. Dad said, don't say that. He didn't do anything. He didn't know. I should have told him. That was a tight little squeeze right there when he backed his car out. And they said, we're so sorry. He said, hey, it's a truck. He said, I'm glad they're not hurt. They weren't hurt. He said, the truck can be fixed. You can't get a leg back or an arm back. And I don't know. I'm thankful for my heritage and seeing it lived out, not just being told about it. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it on that.
Hey, I mean, awesome. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a
I want my kids to see that in me.
Right.
I want them to see that and more out of my life.
And I believe that speaks more than any book that you can read, on race relations, or a movie that you could watch, or a documentary. I think just seeing it at home, from people that you know and trust and love.
And the ugly side of it is, and please, pastors that are friends of mine, maybe that I was a pastor myself at a long period of time in my life, and I just didn't make enough money. No, that's not the reason. But I love the church and I love the ministry so much. But there are pastors that I saw as a very young man that never did throw the keys and that would say things that were not nice. And I always knew that was wrong without even being told it was wrong.
Yeah.
Because anything that would make a child's spirit or heart just feel like something just reached in me and just twisted it a little bit. Mm-hmm. That's not God. Normally it's not. I'm not saying I'm always right about that. You can get off on some tangents. I get it. But I remember saying that's not right. And I would even talk to my dad and mom about it, and they'd just respectfully say, we don't agree with that, and don't ever be like, don't do that. But we're gonna, we're gonna take our mouth off that person too. But there is coming a time, I believe, for all of us where we're going to have to stand, and some of us already have to, and state things that we believe when it comes to race, when it comes to not just race, but just people, period. And I am dare to say that I think it's going to come about believers in Christ.
Yeah.
That we're going to have to stand and say, this is what I align with. And it may not be accepted and the one that everybody says should be the right one to align with, but God takes care of His own, and God will take care of us. And I know for a fact that a lot of my friends that I saw things done to, some of them are in the ministry today, got flourishing. I'm talking about black friends and people that were in my family's life, because God stood by them and took care of them in spite of things that were done that were not just. And that's the way He is.
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk about a crazy story.
Yeah.
Let's do it. That's the appetizer, guys.
So this was a Sunday in Atlanta, Georgia, and I have a good friend, because I tried to call him twice before coming over and just make sure I had permission to use his name, and I never got him. So I'm funny about that.
Dox him. Just say his name anyway.
So he was somebody that I worked for at a major university in Atlanta, and we produced all kinds of things, and he would hire a company that I ran then that would crew sporting events for the Atlantic Coast Conference and for the NCAA. And we had I think at that particular week, I was also working for the Atlanta Braves then too. So I would put a crew chief here and a person there, and then I was just a sole proprietor with the Braves, just one guy doing one thing.
Yeah.
And so, you know how we call it, like double dipping. I could be making money 3 different places on one day every now and then. That wasn't very often, but every now and then that was a wonderful day. And but we were tired. I had a homestand with the Braves. He had multiple events on campus there in Atlanta, and with him, I was exhausted, and I know what it was. We had an editing project that we did on the side, using an edit bay there in Atlanta that we had stayed up all night working on for a company here in Greenville. He was my number one go-to guy for editing projects. And we both are believers, and this really came out of this one thing. We started making some mistakes in an edit, and I just said, you know what, I'm spent. And he said, I'm exhausted too. And when you guys have done this kind of thing, when you grab that couch and get 10 minutes sleep before you have to hop up and do another voiceover or do another edit or approve an edit that your associate did, or double check somebody's spelling on a lower third.
Oh my gosh. And
when you spell Eleanor Roosevelt wrong, you're in trouble. You can't let that kind of, and when we realized we were making those kind of mistakes, it was literally a tribute thing, and Eleanor Roosevelt was mentioned in it. We had to put her name on a lower third, and he misspelled it, and I let it get past me, and we sent it digitally to their people, and he sent back, and he said, I love everything I'm seeing so far, but you can't excuse stupidity. And this is for an institution of higher learning here in the upstate. And I was like, excuse me? Pardon me? And he said, spelling the First Lady of the United States, Eleanor Roosevelt. He said, you spell Eleanor, and he spelled it all out with caps. And I was like, I am so sorry. And that just makes you look dumb when you spell. And so we realized then we're not at our best. And then he either looked at me or him. I don't want to take the credit and say it was me, try to be super spiritual. But one of us said to the other, man, I am dry as a dog. And I knew what he meant. If he said it and he knew what I meant, we meant spiritually.
Yeah. And
he said, yep. And I said, I think that's the problem. And he said, well, whoever said it, the other person said, I agree. And I said, we got enough people. We got competent people that are better than we are in some of these areas that work for us. Let's just leave and let's get this first game going and go to church. It was the NCAA tournament, I believe it was, in baseball that day. And we knew we were going to be burning it all day again. And they said, let's go get refreshed. Literally, that sounds like churchy or cheesy, but I said, I need a refreshing, man. I feel like I'm in a desert spiritually. And when you're that way, Satan's trick is to make you make a mistake on a big project that costs you thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars with a client.
Mm-hmm.
And you may say, oh, man, I made a mistake. No, listen, it all goes back to who you are. And if you are a son or a daughter of God, he puts the creativity in you because he is creativity.
Yeah.
So I looked at him and said, let's go to church. He said, let's do it. And so we went and told the head guys in our crew in the truck that we were going to do that. They were like, oh, man, that's good. They're just glad to see us leave anyway because they could play around some more and get the job done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we left. And we thought we had found a church right by the school. And we went there, and they didn't have an early service. And they were closed up tight. And I was like, man, there's no church? And we realized the timing was off. So we just got in the car, began to drive around, and we wound around through areas of downtown Atlanta, and we found a church. Now, the other thing I'm going to say is I kept a bulletin from that church, and in knowing I was going to be here, and I didn't confirm with you until today what the topic was really going to be. Because when you sent me a text about maybe coming back on the famed podcast, no, this is big for me. I'm thankful. Yeah. And you guys are doing a great thing.
Thank you.
And you didn't tell me then. I had an idea, but we hadn't talked about this in forever.
Yeah, been a while.
So I called, when I talked to you, I said, is it going to be? And you said, well, yes. And I was like, okay, all right. And I could not find the bulletin, which means if I struggle, and I don't mean to speak negatively over myself, I'm big on that. Words carry power. I can struggle with names.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it wasn't Ebenezer Baptist, the most famous Baptist church in the city of Atlanta ever, historically speaking, when it came to black. But I think it was New Elizabeth Baptist Church. I could be wrong, but please, just can we scratch that, please? Is this mic on?
No.
It was we found this church. People were still going in it.
What time was this?
It was around 10 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
We found out they had an early Sunday school, and they had a 10 o'clock service, and then they had an afternoon. They took a little bit of a break and had an afternoon service. I believe. I think they had some food there, and they had but it wasn't a small structure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we just parked, and he looked at me and said, I said, now this is a black church, because I knew I was good.
Yeah.
But I didn't. He was like my boy and everything, but I knew his background was a little different than mine in his walk with the Lord. And he said, oh, man, no, I'm good. He said, let's go. And as we began to walk across this large parking lot, this is when it began to happen. I realized that there were no white people going in the building, but I said, do you notice something I noticed? He said, he said, whiteys. He said, we're the only whiteys on the property. I said, yep. Or he might have said crackers, literally. And see, I'm not offended by that term cracker. Again, the legs.
Yeah.
I told that earlier. So, so anyway, I said, I'm fine with that. Or you said, oh, yeah, I'm fine with it. And so we get in there, and the church was so full, we had to go to the balcony. And don't you know, every church should have that problem. Amen. I mean, I'm serious,
Amen.
man. So I'm up in the balcony with him, and they began to minister. The choir was singing. This I would estimate, and I still don't know how many, but I would estimate 1,500 people in the building.
Wow.
So it wasn't tiny. It wasn't like going to a small 250 people is great. 500 is great, but it shifts. And we're not talking about like mega church, but we're talking about 1,500 people. That's a crowd.
Yeah.
And I looked around everywhere. I even walked down to the edge of the balcony, down a row with people sitting, and leaned over. We were the only two people that weren't of color, and either dark Latinos or black people, African American, black. And again, you know, I think either way to call that is fine. Some of my friends prefer to be called black, some African American. I would ask them, and I would respect whatever they said.
Yeah.
And so we were the only people that weren't of some color other than white. White's a color. So we're the white color in the building. And he looked at me and said, this is awesome, like that. And I'm thinking like, I mean, it is to me, but what reason do you mean that? He said, I don't know, man. I just feel something different. And that's when I knew he had never really been. I'd been in a black church.
Yeah.
And my dad always told me as an evangelist his whole life, or a pastor or a missionary, the easiest place to preach is in a black church that really loves the Lord. He said they will pull the word of God out of you because they are with you, because that's how much they agree with God's word.
Yeah. And
again, my dad, white man to the core, who said that about the African American brethren that he knew. So I just said, well, it's going to get good now. I said, I don't know if this is full-blown AME. I said, or if it's just like I didn't look at the sign. I didn't. So we get in there, and all of a sudden, the anointing of the Holy Spirit began to function in a way that it was tangible. The choir began to sing, and they had to sway. They were perfectly moving, in perfect synchronization, singing just beautiful songs.
Wow.
And I looked over at him. Here's a guy that I've known for a long time, and we've prayed together. We've cried together over things that he went through in his life and that I'd gone through in my life. We were brothers in battle, and been in a lot of professional tough spots and come through, mainly because of his gifts. He's very talented. And he is standing beside me, and I can't really tell this part of the story without getting touched even today. And it's not fake, and I'm going to fight it because I don't want it to come across as anything manipulated and not genuine. But my best friend on the planet, and if you were to ask me today, he and the guy that I was having lunch with today, those are my two closest friends on the earth. I love them like blood brothers. And you know how much I love your dad and my brother Drew. I love these guys the same way. His hands were up in the air, and tears were coming down his face, just crying, not like a little bit of a I'm the Indian who's had trash kicked on me tear. I mean, that's serious stuff too. When we trashed America, I get it. I'm not making fun of the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Lord help me, please. I apologize. I don't know. But it was like he was crying, and I'd really never seen him do that in a spiritual setting. And you didn't have to tell me twice to cry, because I get tender quick in God's presence. It's just me. It's one of my languages of worship. And I just lifted my hands and said, Lord, thank you. I began to say, just fill him, pour out over him, Lord. And I began then the Lord said to me, what about you? He said, I got him. He said, I'm looking for you. And I realized, Shama, at that moment, how dry my life had become, chasing professional praise and people pleasing in the media realm in Atlanta, which I could never do enough to get where I wanted to go anyway. God did more for me. Look what God has done for you.
Yeah.
And has he not done more for you than you could ever do by trying to impress people that you thought could take you somewhere?
Truly.
And I know that's true for me at that moment. I just didn't care. I loved him, and I still love him, but it was just me and Jesus. And I began to cry. And so we finally sat down. We were both just like, whoo, this is unreal. This is amazing, like that. And all of a sudden they took an offering. And I am going to say this about my brother in the black church. They took about 3 or 4 of them that day. It's for real.
Yeah, it was the building fund.
Well, there was the building. There was the pastors.
The Sisters in the Faith Fund.
And this was for a young man going on a missions trip. And they wanted to send him debt-free. Wonderful cause.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. But can we not just have a bake sale? No.
Let him wash some cars or something, y'all. Come on,
a spaghetti supper.
Let's have him grill some hot dogs.
20 cents to give you an extra
next
piece
to the
of garlic
roads.
Bread. Some chili is $1 more.
Yeah. That's how they get you.
Shredded cheese at QT. As I say QT, we're not sponsored by them, but they're fine red shirt people. But at the end of the day, I said, "You want to give?" He said, "Oh man." He said, I'm going to empty. Like he said, I'm going to empty my pockets. And I don't know. I don't remember him carrying a lot of cash. I knew those kind of things about him then, and I didn't carry a lot, but I had some. And we went down. And the offering at that church, they didn't pass the plate. You had to come down and walk. Yeah. They stood in the front, and it was the white outfits, white shirt, white jacket, white bow tie men with white gloves, white pants, white shoes, and the ladies were in white. They were the ushers. And at least that's what I thought they were. Maybe it was something else, just serving in that capacity. And they were all in one section, and they got up in like perfect alignment and got everything lined up. And here we go down, and they dismissed the balcony first. That's kind of important. So they have us come down, and we're like, and he's like, the whole way down there, man, this is just the best. I'm so glad we did this. This is the best day ever. And I'm thinking like, yes, but I said, calm down, man. Like that, all they were saying, relax. I said, you don't want them to see us like going like a couple of like people who's never been to church or something, you know? And he was like, I don't care, man. I'm just so. He was just overjoyed with the Lord had really touched his life and mine. So it was like a refreshing in a desert season. So what do? You get excited. So who shouldn't get excited? The Bible says to enter his gates with thanksgiving and enter his courts with praise. If he's done something for you, then why should you be quiet about it?
Yeah.
And so that kind of plays into what happened next. we're walking up. I put in the offering. We're walking past the front. I would guesstimate, if I remember correctly, the usher I put money in with was, as you got towards the front, you begin to break off and go to an usher. And I chose the very tall young man, an older gentleman. I remember seeing him. He stood out to me, and I went to him. And as I started to go past, there was a guy with a microphone on a stand, just like a straight stand. None of this fancy stuff y'all got up in here, but just a straight stick stand, like an SM57 with a windscreen on it, like an older Shure mic, and like a red Bozo the Clown nose windscreen. And he's in all white, and he's standing with his arms crossed. And I get almost to where you turn to go up the center section, aisle section. Aisle section. So it's 2 rows, 3 sections of seats. The middle were the really wide ones, and then the further back they got, the wider the pews got. You've all seen that. Well, as I go to turn to go up the aisle, that man, I felt somebody grab my arm, and the white glove was on my arm, and he said, "Excuse me, I need to speak with you." And he looked at my friend, whose name I almost just said, and said, "Sir, could you have a seat on the front row?" And so he did. And as I turned back and looked at him, he literally is going like, and I'm looking at him like, no, like that. I mean, I really at this point was like, what in the world?
What did you think was going to happen?
At that moment, I really thought that they were going to quiz me as to why we were there. Like, what's your game? What's the reason you're here? And I apologize for thinking that. Really, if that's wrong, but I didn't know. I thought maybe they misunderstood, because we were more expressive up in the balcony than anybody up there, and they might have thought we were just acting the fool or making fun, but it was all genuine. We weren't jumping around screaming, but we were just broken before God, and I didn't know what the deal was. And as soon as he got me to a certain point, he leaned into my ear and said, "The bishop would like to speak to you." And I said, "Excuse me?" Like that. I said, "Pardon me?" He said, "The bishop." And I look up, he pointed to the platform, and they had those big, if you've ever been to a church.
Holy man chairs.
Yes, it was, he was in the one in the middle, and it was like a throne. But he had no pretension about him.
Yeah.
He was just a sweet, and it was his anniversary Sunday. So one of the offerings was his anniversary offering. He had been there at the church and he's no longer the pastor there. He couldn't be. There's no way, unless he's like Methuselah's cousin or something. He'd be that old. And because he looked very old then, but in his right mind. And he looked at me and just, it was almost like a mafia thing, where you say the boss would like to speak to you. You look over at the boss, and the boss is like.
This is while offering is still being taken up.
Yeah, because remember the balcony. I said that's key.
Yeah,
we came down first, so they're just now starting to release the people on the floor. Yeah. It's going to be a while.
Yeah.
Now, not everybody gave.
How many people do you think were in the church?
About 1,500 people.
Yeah. Wow.
But I would say probably only about half of that participated in that offering. But still, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so he said, "Can I ask you a question? The bishop wants to know where you're from." And I said, "I'm from Greenville, South Carolina." He said, "Then what brings you to our city and to our church?" And I said, "I am here doing sports television work with the Atlantic Coast Conference and the NCAA. We would do the sat feed footage of all the NCAA baseball regionals and super regionals. And this particular school made it to the regional and super regionals like clockwork. And so we would be hired to do what's called cut-ups, and we'd run them to the sat feed of one of the big networks there in Atlanta. They would dump it in, send it up to the bird in the old terminology, send it to the satellite, and then everybody, like Channel 4, Channel 7, I'd get home and see our footage locally being shown.
Wow.
If any of the local teams were in that tournament. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'd tell my parents, hit the VCR, whatever it was, DVD recorder.
Hit it, record it.
Yeah, and get on it.
That's
and so all of a sudden, he said, I told him that, and I said, "And that is the director of television and video production at said university." And when I said that, he said, "Oh, Lord Jesus," like that. And I thought, oh no. But he was just touched by the fact, and I don't mean this, I'm just being honest with you right now. I'm just being transparent. So everything I've said today on this podcast is from my heart. I really do believe, and I've told this before to my father and other people, that gentleman at that moment thought, this guy is worth some bank, and he's from here. And he said, "Why is he here?" I said, "Because we both were dry and thirsty spiritually, and we were hungry, and we drove around, and God led us here. And I believed that. And he said, does he have a home church in Atlanta? And I said, no, sir. I knew he didn't. Because back then he was driving back and forth to a hometown in South Carolina. His family hadn't moved to Atlanta yet. And so I didn't elaborate and tell him all of that. I just answered the yes and no, black and white questions. And he was like, oh, thank you, Lord. And he might have just him, not the church leadership, not the bishop, but him. But I'm telling you, that was the first thing I was like, uh-oh. Because he said, oh, Lord, thank you, Jesus, like that. And I was like, yes. I said something like, yes, he's a great guy or something like that. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. Yeah. And he said, but what about you? And I said, well, my dad is I just said, and this is the one part. I said, my dad is a bishop. And the only reason I said that is because in the black church, a lot of times they'll call a bishop what a white church would call a pastor.
Yeah.
Or a father or a shepherd. And actually, my dad reached a title of an apostle because of the apostolic gifting and anointing that was on his life. And if people listening to this think that's crazy, I don't apologize. It's in the Bible. So, yeah. But I knew if I said apostle, I didn't know how that church would take the word apostle.
Yeah.
So I just went safe and said bishop. And and then I got the second, glory to Lord Jesus, like that, and he would grab my arm with the white glove, and I'm thinking like, you really need to stop doing that. and he said, I'll be right back. He said, just have a seat in the front row. And he walked me back over and sat like I was royalty, went up to the bishop. He was whispering in his ear, and the bishop was just, I could see him just shaking his head like back and forth like that, and then nodding his head, and then that guy, he whispered back to the man. He came back down, and he said to me, the bishop would like for you to come up on the platform and sit by him. And I said, for what? I think I just said, why? I think that's what I said. And Andy, oh shoot, he leans over and dang it!
We can bleep it. We can bleep it out if you want.
Yeah. He leaned over and said, do it, man. This is gonna be awesome. And I said, stop it. Like, we're just having, I said,
were you even like Sunday dressed? Like, what were you? It was like a button down?
Yeah, it wasn't, no. And you know that in that kind of black church, everybody was dressed.
Oh, yeah, to the nines.
To the nines. The ladies had on the Easter-looking clothes with the hats. And even the younger kids, the younger boys that would be at school the next day in T-shirt jeans and Chuck Taylors or in Jordans, they were in like dress shoes that hurt their feet because they were too small, but they had to wear them in like suits that their mother made them wear with a vest and a tie, a clip-on tie, but it was a tie.
Yeah.
And the guys that had money, they dressed like they got out of a Bentley or something, and they came in there with like a hat and the whole nine with a cane. Some of them, the older men, would have the canes. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was that flavor.
Yeah.
And so I said, why? He said, because he wants you to speak to the people and tell them what you told me. And I was like, what did I tell you? Yeah. And he was like, that your father is a bishop, and that the Lord touched your life today. And I said, and at that moment, it just hit me. Oh, okay. That's all this is about. They just want me to give a testimony. And I've never been shy in front of an audience or in front of people. And I just said, I'll be happy to. And a calm came over me, and almost like an anticipation and excitement. And so he walked me up there. The offering's still going. I'd say it's almost about 20% of the people left to give. We're still in line. And they were singing and swaying and the organ going. They had a drummer and a bass player. And a guitar player doing like in the black church, the guitar is more like a ding, 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 you know, like that. Instead of like
going ham.
More like a B.B. King type thing almost sometimes. Ding, ding, yay, and then it's just going.
Hey man, that's
and I was loving that. I was getting.
That's not even the real song. That's the idol. That's the in between. Is the
exactly.
Jam session.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're just breaking that down a little bit before they went back into a verse or a chorus or That wasn't even a bridge.
Yeah.
Like you said. And so all of a sudden, I'm sitting in a chair beside him. He leaned over and said, "Young man," he said, the deacon. He called him deacon. Deacon so and so told me what you shared with him. He said, "Can you share that with the people?" I said, "First of all, I'm honored to be here with you today, Bishop," and I meant that. And I said, "I understand this is your anniversary Sunday," and I said, "What a legacy I saw how many years you've been here. And I said, what a legacy. And I said, and what a honor it is to be with you today. And he said, thank you, son. He said, that means a lot. He said, I don't know how many more of these years I've got left. He said, this might be my last anniversary Sunday here. Either I'll go on to my heavenly reward or I'll take some of my reward here on earth. You know what I mean? And I said, yes, sir. Yes, sir. My father is near retirement as well. He said, tell me about him. And I just told him a little bit about my dad. And next thing I know, it's wrapping up. And he said, well, I want you to speak to the people. He said, I said, and say what? What would you, I said, I don't want to say anything. He said, just say what's on your heart. And so he got up, they got up and did one more song. Just a song, a real song. And during that song, it just began to come again, a wave of his presence. And I couldn't wait at that point. I was so excited to get the mic. That sounds so terrible. Yeah. And he got up and introduced me. He said, he said, Timothy Bach. I think he might have called me Batchman or something like that. They never get the last name right. Yeah. Nobody does. Red and yellow, black or white. You had that happen. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he didn't say my last name correct, but I didn't care. And he said, he asked me if I'd ever been in the ministry. And I said, yes. So he called me, Reverend Timothy something, and I appreciated that, and I still had credentials then, could marry and bury people in South Carolina and other places if I had permission, and so he said he's going to come and share with you. They are a guest. He is also with, he embellished that. I don't know that he knew what to say, but he made that person who was with me's title even bigger than it was. and he said, let's make him welcome, and I just stepped up, and I don't know what made me do this, but the first thing I said was I said something like, because I said something like, I went black church. And I just said, I want to give all praise and glory to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who was and is to come and lives forevermore, like that. And the whole place just went, I mean, like it's like the whole church just broke loose.
Yeah.
And I said, and I was glad when they said unto me, I do remember saying these lines, let us go into the house of the Lord. He said, because today I was dry. I was thirsty. And I remember telling my dad, I now know what you mean. I could have gone on for an hour, Shama, because everything.
And they do. And they do.
And everything I said, they just began, they'd get up and just shout and maybe do a little dance in the aisle or wave that funeral home fan, because I don't care how cold the air was.
Got to have a funeral home fan.
The older ladies. Yeah. It was just the older ladies and the ones that were a little heavy set. They were overweight. Was that a heavy set? Don't know what that means. Yeah. And just fan and fan and fan, and they'd get up and just wave those fans it was like I realized then that I was just getting caught up in it a little bit, but it was I don't apologize for that, because it was euphoric for me spiritually even. And these were people that I knew embraced, now we're getting back to where we started, they embraced me whether I was white or black. They accepted me because of my heart. And my heart said, I've been working in this business called video and television production for several days in a row. I realized that I was dry, and that without his fresh anointing, I wasn't going to do any work worth having. So we decided to find a church. We went to one that we thought was the one, and it wasn't. Their services started later in the day, and we couldn't wait that long. We're going to leave here and go back to a location and join some co-workers and make some TV, if you will. And I said, but we ain't leaving yet. And I said, we came to receive from God. And let me say that whether I'm from South Carolina or we're the only white people in this building, you made us family. And I said, and will never forget this as long as I live.
Wow.
And
people are doing laps.
Yeah, and they're just like shouting and screaming but under control. It wasn't like total bedlam. And it wasn't fake. It was they were so, I don't know. And yeah, there are some people I'm sure sitting there with arms folded, looking at me like, well, you don't have a right to be up here, because there's animosity in both ways in this race thing. And I don't mean that bad towards a black person or a white person. I've just seen it, and I didn't look for that, so I don't know for sure. But as we left, and I just said, Bishop, you better come on before I preach, something like that. And he's like, go ahead, like that, And I was like, I can't do it. I got to go back to it, And he came up and hugged me and kissed me on the cheek, and did something like with his handkerchief, like I don't know, just to bless me or something, wave offering over me, and that's in the Bible too for people to get hung up over stuff like that. Yeah. And I remember walking off that platform, and I stopped, and my coworker, my friend, stood up, and we both walked the rest of the way down the aisle, up towards the balcony to go back and sit back down, and people were getting up out of their seats and stopping us and hugging us.
Wow.
And holding me. Some of the ladies there just held me and said, baby, I've been in this church. One of them said, she's a very old lady, I've been in this church for I don't know how many years, she said. I don't want to try to recall, but it was a long time. And I've never, she said, there was a time when they wouldn't let a white person in this building. She said, because they wouldn't let us in theirs. And she said, and that ain't right. She said, and I can tell you this, I ain't never heard no white man talk like that. No white preacher talk like that in this church. And I said, ma'am, I'm not a preacher. She said, baby, don't you deny what God has called you to do and put on you. And I just remember then, I just cried too, because she reminded me of the call of God on my life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And not that I can't be Jesus when I'm cutting grass and the neighbor walks up. And that's real ministry too, bro.
Right.
You ain't got to have 1,500 people to shout you down to have ministry. In fact, it's probably less ministry there than it is talking to somebody one-on-one at the mall before the security guard kicks you out.
Sir.
And that security guard's probably white because they're white. No,
Paull Blart. We've seen Paull Blart. No. Paull Blart's a documentary.
Yeah. So white, heavy-set security guard with a mustache.
We get back to our seats, and he looks at me and said, what just happened? No, I said to him, what just happened? He said, I don't know, but it was awesome. Like that, And we both, we remember that. We tell that story like every time we see each other or talk to each other, we'll bring it up.
That's so funny.
That we walk in just looking for a place to go to church, and we both end up down front, and I'm on the platform with the pastor, the bishop, being asked to speak to the entire church.
Yeah.
And I'm not, we weren't like 2 of 20 white people, not 2 of 10 or 5. We were and I proved that again by looking at the audience from the front of the building on the stage. There were no other white people there, and that's not wrong. If they have a church that's all black, it's not. You're not wrong if you have an all white church, unless you seclude or exclude people from coming in of color and tell them they're not welcome. Then you're violating almost everything that the Bible is about.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case there. I didn't see anybody else white pulling up trying to get in. But we did, and it was one of the greatest days of my life. And since that, I've had 2 more people tell me privately that they believe that God had called me to minister part of my life before it's done. If I will obey the will of God, I'll be in settings where I speak and minister and share ministry with people of color as much or more than I do people of my own race, which is white. And I have spoken at a couple of other black churches, but they were really small, like storefronts. But God was just as real there. And I didn't try to get those opportunities. They came to me without me looking for them. But I love what I felt that day, and it wasn't something they brought because they were black. You know what I felt that day was the freedom to be who I was in Christ, with no limitations, barriers, or restrictions. And it makes for a great story, and maybe, I know it does, but it's true. Every bit of it happened. It was just great.
They didn't even know who you were, and then they invited you to talk.
That's the level of trust.
And I think
you could have been crazy.
Well, yeah, and I've said this too to my father. I called him like that evening. I called him and told him all about it. He was like, you know your grandfather. He's like, well, I'm not surprised. Mom was still, going strong. Then my mother, he's passed, and she was in her good health and good body and mind and spirit. And I had them put me on speaker, which I would always do. I'd check in with them when I was gone for very long professionally because I'm close to my family and just check on how they're doing. And she would love for me to call in. You know how Nana was, and just say, "I'm doing good, Mom. Everything's great. You know, I'm not 12, but I'm doing great. You know." And I'm glad she cared. But I remember talking to them that night, saying it, and she was like, "I'm so proud of you, darling," like that. And my dad said, "Well, I'm not surprised. You know, that you just told me surprises me. You and your mother. The only thing that would have been different is if your mother had been there, you wouldn't have got a word in." That, you know. But I think I told Dad that night on the phone. I think a lot of it happened because of the respect that leadership carried for anybody connected or related to someone in a similar position. There was a lot of honor that came from that bishop towards my dad, who he never got to see or meet. When he found out that that was part of my lineage and my spiritual heritage, it immediately put me somewhere in his eyes.
Yeah.
That was not just some guy walking off the streets. And I think he bore witness. I was just so hungry that day. I remember we should always be that hungry, but I remember I was just so at home in that church, and it was such a wonderful thing. And I'm sure he just picked up on that too, that I wasn't playing, that it was just. And he said, "What has the Lord done for you?" I said, I said, "I had a washing in the balcony." I said, "I hadn't cried like that in a long time. And I've never seen my brother down there. I've never seen him cry like that." And I said, the Lord is so good." And he would sit there all together, you know, then he'd do like, "Hey!" You know, that like that. He said, "Yes, he is. Yes, he is. He brought me somewhere, and he brought you today." He said, "You got to tell somebody," like that. And I was like, "Amen." I was thinking like, "Well, good to see you. God bless you." And he just held on to my hand. I do remember that. I was like, "God bless you, Bishop." He held on to my hand like, "I need you to tell that." That's when he said that. I told you, "I need you to tell that to everybody." So between the white glove on the arm and the bishop's hand on my hand,
like,
I felt like, I got to do something right.
Locked in.
Yeah, I'm here until I do what they ask.
That's so awesome.
That is such a crazy story.
and now it'll live on forever.
Yeah.
And when I think about it from where we are, I wish I could. I did call a friend of mine because the only thing that ever happened in my life remotely close to that wasn't like that, but it was the same spirit. And it was a guy that I can say his name proudly, named Steve Watson. He's here in the upstate of South Carolina. He pastors New Jerusalem Baptist Church in Greer. And he grew up at Greer. He was a decorated athlete at Greer High School, went on to collegiate and international recognition as a wrestler, Olympic wrestler, the Greco-Roman. Not the Raw, which I know we have an affinity for.
There's not Olympic professional wrestling. What?
I apologize. And so he was doing a work in a community called Sunnyside in the late '80s, early '90s, and he and I got together, and it's a cool story. And at that time, I was running a teen club out of the church my dad pastored. We had brought in some West Coast hip-hop acts to do a war on drugs campaign in the public schools, and he heard about it. We partnered with one of those said rallies at the Greer Armory, which used to be more downtown Greer. Mm-hmm. And next thing I know, he and I are going together in Sunnyside, walking the streets, inviting people to his church, which was a former crack house then that they had bought. And our church men were helping them remodel it.
Wow.
and turned it into their first facility. Now they have a beautiful brick and mortar that was a house. That really was a crack house. Now they have a beautiful, large church, and I'll be going to worship with him soon. He and I, really, it's funny, I had no idea I was going to be doing this. We've renewed we've always stayed in touch, but we had a mutual friend pass away recently. Coach Travis Perry of Greer High School, one of the godliest men I ever met in the coaching profession. And Pastor Steve Watson and I reconnected about that. And we began to talk again. And we said, "Do you remember the time God put us together when everybody's newspaper articles were written by the Greer Citizen and the Greenville News about how odd it was this very white man and very black man were together?" And they called us, literally, it sounds so corny, but they literally in the article called us chocolate vanilla, and they called us Oreo. and that was literal verbiage in the write-up. And these were professional seasoned writers. They just didn't know what to say about us.
Yeah.
And when I would go down there into Sunnyside to meet him before he was with me, more than once I had police cars pull up on me, not knowing who I was yet, because a white guy only went into Sunnyside to sell drugs or buy drugs. And 2 different occasions I had my face pressed on the hood of a police car and my arm bent behind my back before either one of the kids that I was coming to pick up for church would say, hey, that's my pastor. And the guy would know the kid and say, you promised Jeremy? And he'd say, yeah. Or the other time it was Steve. Steve would say, hey, he's with me, man. We're doing some work down here in the projects. And they would let me get up.
Wow. Because
they didn't know who I was. And they wouldn't let me reach. One time I was so naive, I tried to reach my pocket to get a business card. And back then it wasn't as bad as now. Now I'd probably be dead for that, or at least hurt very badly. And they'd just be doing their job.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking that. But that was one of the early seeds of that. And Steve and I have talked recently about getting together and just praying and seeing what God would have us do now. Not so we could get acclaim or fame, if nothing else, just for, I think something would happen in the spirit if we got together and just prayed. I don't care if you're purple and green and orange, you just pray.
Yeah.
And pray for where we are as a nation. But it's for a white kid that grew up in a white family in Alabama in a Pentecostal church setting, I've never known anything towards my family that are black or brown, because it was never modeled for me, and it was never endorsed as acceptable behavior. My parents made a distinct effort to make sure otherwise. And then I got to live it out with them and then on my own, and hopefully, I think, pass that down to my kids and meet people like Steve Watson, like Bishop in Atlanta, and many others who are just tremendous and most impactful men in my life in the ministry. I'd say about half of them are white and half of them are black. And why am I even saying that? They're men of God, so it don't matter. Yeah, I think we kid ourselves if we say there's not cultural differences in some parts of our country between races, but there's cultural differences between just white people. I'm white, and I can go to some parts of this country, and I have, and do certain things that I would do in one state, and the other state among the same race. I mean, what are you doing?
Yeah, you could probably fold the country up 4 different ways and it'd be completely different in every area.
Yep.
Tim, Uncle Tim, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, this is a great episode.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Yeah.
Well, I don't mean to be corny about y'all, but look at the 2 of you.
Yeah, it is. It's been a.
Have y'all ever thought about how, in all this mess going on, that God forged a friendship and a somewhat of a mentorship?
Yeah.
And then a partnership.
It's amazing. I think when people ask us how did we meet, well, I'm like, it's a weird. I met him when he was 12 and I was 18 and I moved here for college, and we just
same church
have kept up and would go to cookout and would go to movies and hang out and got into comedy, and up until even a couple months ago when I think our producer Andrew, his mom had mentioned to him, he was like, hey, there's a studio for sale in Traveler's Rest, y'all should look into having your own space. And then I talked to Andrew and I was like, yeah, maybe we do need our own space, and it would be nice. And then Andrew Simmons, he goes to this church and he asked his pastor, he's like, hey, do you think we'd be able to have a space? And they're like, yeah, you can use this upstairs space. So
now we're not in a basement.
No, we're not in a basement.
No.
And we have a plan. I haven't talked about it on the show, but we're gonna build it out to do music in here as well, so record some projects. We have an idea to do some compilation projects where we just bring a bunch of artists in and we just kind of transition this room to tracking vocals and instruments and getting it done. So it's been a huge blessing. So to think from when we all started a few months, 2 years ago with a couple microphones in PD's basement to now, with stuff getting millions of views,
40 minutes every time to get it to even work,
so many reach, to now to having these really expensive mics and videos and all this stuff, and essentially having a set. But God's been very good, and I don't think I think probably the best part of working with PD and all the other guys that we team up with is there was no ambition for any of this. This wasn't on the 2-year plan.
Right.
It was like, hey, let's get together, let's create, let's have fun, let's love each other before and afterwards. You know what I mean? Wow. And let's have fun with it. And so to be here now, it's a I mean, you probably foresaw it and you said it, and we didn't know. So to be here, it's it's like living a miracle.
And I know you used to close with the praise report.
We still do.
Okay.
You give us a praise report.
Well, mine is the two of you, and I mean it. And this is something that I ask God, if there be any way that I could say something. There's two things, and sometimes you never know what you do for someone else until you get to talk to them on down a road and see what your comments or what you did. So never ever belittle what God uses you to do. And both of you now, as I look at you, there was a Sunday morning, we had been, the Bachman family are big Alabama Crimson Tide football fans. It's pretty well documented by anybody that knows this. Yes. Even and there's some that aren't, but most, I'd say 90% of the family, 95 are. And we will gather and watch games at a family member's house. Usually it could be yours or Papa's house, my dad's, your grandfather, or Bethany's house, or whatever. All right, and you may not remember this, but at that time we went to church together regularly, and it was on a Saturday. We'd watch the game, and either Alabama lost, which was at that time like unheard of, or something else happened, and I showed my tail, so to speak, or I said something that made it be like Alabama football took way too high of a place in my life. And I came to you. I'd been on the stage in the worship team that Sunday at the church we attended, and I came down. You were sitting about middle of the middle, and that day you were with your fam. I mean, your guys were together, your mom, your dad, your sister. Y'all didn't always sit together. This little, sneaky kid named Thomas would always try to like pull you off to the side. And so, but it was just y'all were together. And maybe Thomas was sitting in the same row. I don't know. I love Thomas. If he's listening, he knows I do. And I came to you and I said, got a half a second? You said, yeah. And I said, what I did or said yesterday about Alabama football was wrong. I said, I don't want you to ever think that matters more to me than my relationship with Jesus. Do you remember me ever doing that?
Yeah, I do.
And you looked at me, and this is what I praised the Lord for about you, and then I got one for you. You said, you looked me dead in the eye, and you always do that. Sometimes for me that can be a little uncomfortable, even though I'm an outgoing guy.
I'm just so used to doing podcasts now, I feel like. Yeah. I stare at people.
Yeah. You looked at me, well, please don't do that anymore. You looked at me and you said, Uncle Tim, I know you, and I would never think that Alabama football would mean more to you than your relationship with Jesus. It's too late for me to ever believe that.
Yeah.
And I was like,
wow,
whoa. And I remember walking away thinking, I said, thank you, I love you. You said, I love you too, Uncle Tim. And we did the family hug thing because I love this guy. And he
I knew you were just caught up in the moment about LSU beating Alabama or whatever happened that day.
I was wrong. And so, but that moment, you really just ministered to me, man. So that's a praise report. I mean that. And that was something that I've thought about I never want to get back in that position where I have to even say that. And I don't think I have since then, except for that one game. No, I know I haven't. It has changed for me some. I'm still crazy about him, but not quite like. I mean, I don't like Alabama football, but so thank you for that. I praise God for your ministering to me. The words you gave to me were healing words for me that I needed right then. For you, I was fortunate enough to work an event recently that you were hired to be talent on. You were, I believe the term they gave him was celebrity judge.
Me and Lauren walked up on that,
was
right?
The Greenville Christmas Parade. You did. Y'all biked over. Yeah.
And I was just a guy that got some food services, some catering early on in a tent. and just ran a camera.
Yeah.
Just a lowly camera operator. Now the camera operator.
Hey, that tent was that little VIP area where we were at. That was the
joint.
That was the place to
Man,
be.
no doubt, man. The catering.
They had
the food
hot.
there
It was cold, and they had hot chocolate and fruit and cheeses and crackers.
Hey, of all the events I've ever worked, this is real fast. What would you say? Guess. I've worked a lot of events, entertainment and sports. If I told you the two event, the three is about a three-way tie for the three things that had the best catering of anything I ever worked in my life. One would be something dear to your heart.
Yeah, wrestling, WWE, Vince
Oh my
McMahon.
gosh.
Catering.
They have like
legendary
they got a spread?
stories.
oh my gosh, they have a chef inside and a
Yeah.
separate like chef, sous chef type tent outside prepping the food. The pre-prep and cooking and all that early stuff, bring it in. The other guy finishes it. It's like he dresses it up and finishes up, does the emerald, bam, bam. The emerald guy, the old guy, chef guy does stuff. And the amount of stuff around the room is just unbelievable. I just still can't ever remember anything like it. Then there was the Golf Channel.
I believe that.
Yes.
And for wrestling, Ric Flair, when he left WWE to go to TNA for a little bit, he said that TNA gave them like a pizza each, and that WWE had enough food to feed China.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Because the third one,
Pizza each.
the one that came in
Yeah.
third was a thing that I only worked twice in my life. The show is a music tour, and I would get, like you do now, you get a call, hey, you want to work in they need a so-and-so, and we know
Yeah.
they know that you know production, and you're
Right.
not going to embarrass them. You're not going to act like a fanboy or break a camera.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to get those calls a lot, and because of my position at the arena here. And I got the call for the Justin Bieber show that came to Greenville. And it was the last two shows of his American leg of that tour. And I worked the Greenville one. The guy liked my work, and they took me with them to Atlanta for the Atlanta show at Phillips Arena. And that was the one where Akon walked out in his white Adidas suit.
Yeah.
And he's sponsored head to toe by Adidas because everybody was on Bieber's record back then. Akon came out. Luda came out.
Luda.
The 69 Boys came out. The guy who opened for it was Sean Kingston, who I sat with at catering,
Wow.
and he was such a nice guy, just so unassuming, and he was vivacious and very talented.
Yeah.
He might have been the most talented person on the stage all
Crazy.
night. And then who was the girl that came out that did stuff with him? Oh my goodness, did a big pop star as well. All those people were in Atlanta. None of them were in Greenville except Sean, who was on the tour. And their spread, I'm sorry,
Hey.
the Justin Bieber spread was ridiculous.
He had that 15-year-old pop
Yeah.
star tour money.
Can't imagine.
Oh,
Honestly, that's like when we do shoots now. I'm like, hey, that is, regardless of however the shoot goes,
yeah,
people need to know that they can eat well.
yes.
That's all that matters. It could be
Yeah.
hot as day. It could be a 14-hour day or whatever. But if I was like, hey, they
As long as I
had
can snack on peanut M&Ms all day.
plenty of
Yeah.
breakfast, plenty of lunch, and then plenty of dinner. Yeah, that's it.
Well, I'm not sure if it's in any of the shots. It's going to be accessible to the video side.
Oh, you want?
But I'm going to tell
I can
you
pan a camera
that
over.
catering here. I've been waiting for this. As soon as this thing's over, I'm opening the mini fridge and I'm stuffing my shirt full of these small snacks. I'm doing it. It's right over here, and it's a beautiful thing. So you and I were working the same event. Well, I was working it. You were the celebrity judge.
Yeah.
You and like some guy looked like he was from Italy, and some lady that was
A lady who was she was a radio presenter.
Yeah, she was a radio person, attractive, professional-looking woman, and Shamas was like just bringing
I was
out
hanging
his,
out.
He had his wardrobe. It was strong that night. It's always strong, but his wardrobe game was like upper echelon.
I actually agonized over it. I was like, Grace, what about this? What about this? I was hitting the catwalk in the living room where you're like, wait a second.
Well, you were on the red carpet in
Different
that
angles.
tent with the mayor. You and the mayor.
I was, yeah, me and the mayor.
And
eating hors d'oeuvres.
that night, I'm just going to be real with you. I remember being on there thinking, I was so glad to see you because you arrived professionally and almost like kind of a cool way, not late, but you didn't get. So one of the other judges got there like an hour early.
Yeah.
That's when you know they've never done anything like that before.
You can't be too eager.
No.
You gotta
and
pretend
you
like you've
rolled
been
up
there
in there
before.
like making sure your people to talk to their people. Yeah,
you worked it out. Is it my cheers, my iPad?
It was almost if Shaman was like, "Is this parade going to start? What's happening? I don't have all night. I'm only here for one thing, to judge these floats, and I ain't got all night.
Very
to do
stressful. It was very.
Somebody bring me a green pen with red
right
ink.
now.
I need red and green. It's
I need
Christmas.
Some yellow M&Ms now.
He was the man. And I remember looking down, thinking, "Man, Father," because I remember conversations with you. We'd pray together.
Yeah, man.
And where God has brought you,
wild,
and His faithfulness to both of you. And I remember thinking, I'm so happy that guy sitting right there, and then clears a bell. You know how Satan loves to try to destroy anything in your heart and mind that's good. It's his job, so you can't fault him. It's all he's got left. And so he says in my head, yeah, that used to be you. You would be, at least, he said, at least that would be you. And I looked down and saw somebody with like doing a stand-up. Your dad, Scott, who's my brother, who's very incredibly gifted in media and video production, who runs everything for our city, and that department was doing a stand-up with a female, lack of a better term, sideline reporter. She was the roaming reporter of the parade.
Yeah.
And the enemy, his voice said, yeah, that used to be you. And now you're running a camera up here that honestly, they just need a warm body behind the camera. You're not going to you won't do any moves, no zooms, no focus rolls, no pans, which is not true. I did do a few. I did, but although I was told not to get too artistic, that just to keep it simple, stupid, that kind of thing. And I was like, I began to have like a bit of a pity party right there. I'm not proud of that. You may not remember this, but you said something to me. We just were conversing. I think I went and got something to drink, or you did, and we asked the other, "You want something?" I don't know what happened. Maybe that isn't how it happened, but somehow you got to me conversationally, and you looked at me and said, it's still inside of you, don't you? You know that your days of doing creative things aren't over. And you said something like, you're one of the most creative, and you're so handsome, and no, you didn't say that. You said you're such an amazing personality.
I mean,
no, you said something about the gifts that are in you. You're still there, and you made me feel. Again, I'm not proud that I needed to hear that, but I needed that night, and you were right on time. So my praise report would be for what the two of you said years apart. I'm talking 2 or 3 years apart, at different settings, that encouraged this man of God. Because no matter how much I love the Lord, I get discouraged. I'd love to say otherwise, but it's not true. I do, and I have to be sure I focus back on what matters most. But both of you spoke words of life and of hope over me, and I thank God for that, man.
I think more than anything, PD and I talk a lot of times, like even hearing the Powerhouse episode, which people love, the two-parter. Yeah. But I'm like, man, you all were have been doing creativity back when the barrier of entry was, I mean, massive, and you had to mail and phone call. And I'm like, now PD and I really organize this show and projects without seeing each other for months on end. It's just texts and calls, and hey, review this, watch this. Hey, what's your shirt size? We're gonna do this. Hey, you know what I mean? Yep. And so I think about it now. I'm like, y'all ran so we could essentially just kind of just coast. Yeah. And man, whenever all this stuff clears, all this COVID stuff, we want to do something. PD, we were telling Mr. Scott, we were telling your brother, like, hey, we got to bring the Bachmans together for, like, maybe we'll get like a coffee shop, rent a coffee shop and just do like a reunion interview and let you guys play some music and do something.
Bachman Brothers Band.
The reunion.
Why not?
Hey, let's do it. Let's do it. We'll get everybody back. Pay you guys in pizza. That's what Scott said. That was your the rate.
Not China.
The Bachman rate.
Not enough food to feed China.
We'll give you a pizza each.
My praise report is I'm going to take a nap after this.
Yeah. What's my praise report?
That's kind of bad.
No, my praise report is that we had Uncle Tim on. I feel like it's PD was like, yeah, he's hard to get a hold of.
Busy guy.
But we got you, and it's been a great episode, and I know people are gonna love it.
Mm-hmm. It's my privilege to be with you guys, and pray God continues to bless everything you put your hand to, man, because you have such gifts inside of you.
We'll pray for the air conditioning.
Yeah, the gifts too, but that's currently the air conditioning.
But also AC. I don't know. I'll take AC over the gifts at this point.
The gifts got us the AC. No, Tim, thanks so much. Hey, let me do the. Hold on a second. I got to do the. What is it? How we normally end this? This has been Church Stories,
and you've been awesome.
And this has been Uncle Tim, and that's been camera number 1, and that's been camera number 2, and this has been the microphones. This has been the set. All right. See ya.